Hi, my name is Robert Hill. I'm a white male with dark brown hair. I'm wearing headphones. My daughter is sitting here with me, and I'm wearing a blue and white shirt. And we are here to, well, I'll hand it off to Lana.
Hi, everybody. I'm Lana. I am a 45-year-old white female with purple hair, colored, of course. I'm also wearing a purple dress, and I also wear glasses. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. We will be having a discussion about internship accessibility, and we are here to educate, engage, create awareness, support, and advocate for students with disabilities in the social work program. Just to briefly introduce, this is our quick agenda. We will kind of begin with introductions. We did start already a little bit. We will discuss why we are here. We'll share a little bit of the literature review, and we'll also share the survey results that some of you, maybe all of you, have filled out before. We will introduce the amazing panelists for today, and then we'll open up for some discussion questions and answers.
So we already did most of the introductions. I did post the links for the NASW-NYC CARES Member Ambassadors, as well as the Students to Social Work Committee in the chat. But really, we just want to talk about the aim of the event, and it is to create awareness about accessibility barriers experienced by social work students with disabilities in education and field placements, and discuss possible supports.
So why are we here today? The social work field promotes self-determination, yet students with disabilities must have a documented disclosure of their disabilities to receive accommodations. Students with disabilities experience increased financial, social, and emotional burdens, resulting in feelings of exclusion and/or dropping out. This was taken from Fox et al. From 2021. When Robert and I did read literature to prepare for this event, we found that there were three main issues that a lot of the students with disabilities and social work struggled with, and they all kind of revolved around law or policy, stigma, or resources. So for the law, we found that the policy leaves room for interpretation, allowing universities to do minimal adjustments to physical and non-physical environments, resulting in issues with accessibility and many students' needs not being met. Regarding stigma, students with disabilities are usually perceived as service users instead of service providers. Many students with invisible disabilities do not disclose their disability or advocate for their needs because of stigma. And some of the resources information is that there's lack of knowledge of available resources and accommodations and where to get them. There's also lack of resource knowledge among faculty and field supervisors.
So a brief description of some of our main findings is that only 56.4% of the US social work students with disabilities registered with the Disabilities Resource Department. The other 43.6 did not register due to not needing accommodations, not meeting the diagnostic requirements, or time constraints is what they found. Of those registered, 47.1% received classroom accommodations, and 14.8 field accommodations, mostly for physical disabilities. And this is mostly due to a lack of awareness of field accommodations. 20% of students with disabilities reported not knowing about disability resources on their campus, as well as one of the most shocking facts is the Council of Social Work Education did not include questions about social work students with disabilities in their survey until 2021. So that was just last year, and the results won't even be published until sometime this summer. Educators are gatekeepers to social work profession. CSW-E instructs them to assess and and terminate students with psychiatric disabilities from the social work programs when needed. Educators experience anxiety, frustration, anger, sadness resulting from students' unmet needs or terminating them from the program.
So this is just to share a little bit about the numbers found in New York State's higher education for students with disabilities. And this is the information from 2020 to 2021. This was kind of part of the survey where we were asking if you do identify as having a disability, if you could please select which disability you identify with. So for neurodevelopmental disabilities, which includes ADHD, ASD, which is, so ADHD is attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ASD is autism spectrum disorder. There's also communication, speech, learning disability, or motor. And for this number, we have that occupationally specific programs included 7,452 students, whereas other degree credit programs were 44,322,000. I'm sorry, did I say that right? 44,322 students with disabilities. For sensory disabilities, it includes blind, low vision, deaf, hard of hearing. And these numbers represent occupationally specific programs included 692 students, and other degree credit programs were 3,364 students. For mental health disabilities, for occupationally specific programs, it was 2,767 students, and for other degree credit programs were 25,073 students. For physical disabilities, including basic chronic medical conditions, mobility or orthopedic disabilities, that number is for occupationally specific program 1,049 students, and other degree credit programs 11,268 students. For intersystem disabilities, which includes alcohol or substance abuse recovery, complex chronic medical conditions, or traumatic brain injury, for occupationally specific programs were 636 students, and other degree credit programs 4,353 students. For temporary disabilities, for occupationally specific programs, it was 314 students, and other degree credit programs 3,775 students. So the total number of students that identified with occupationally specific programs in New York State for 2020 to 2021 academic year were 9,926 students, and for other degree credit programs were 70,220 students.
Okay, so that was just what we had found in our research, but I'm sure there's much more out there. But here is the survey results from the survey that we had put out. So we had 12 responses, which is not a lot, but I think it's also indicative of the facts that we just showed you. So 66% of the students who responded were MSW students, 33.3% were BSSW students, and 33% of them identify with having a disability, and all were invisible disabilities. 25% asked for help, out of which 33.3% received resources and information that did not meet their needs. So of those 25% who did ask for help, 33.3% did not have their needs met. 66.7% had or are currently in internship and did not request accommodations due to stigma. So two of the voices that we had kind of picked out because they had made some really remarkable remarks was you cannot see my disability, so I did not even try to get accommodations because I felt that I would not have been believed. Another is that I think that even though I understand mental health is considered a disability, the stigma is still present. And I would not mention it for a responsible accommodations via my placement. So even though, they identified, they did not want to disclose because they felt that the stigma would not help their advancement. So now we're going to open it up to
Well,
the panelists.
before we're going to open it up, we're going to introduce our
Yes, I'm
panelists.
sorry. That's what I meant.
Yeah, so we have Dr. Paul Archibald, who is an assistant professor in the Department of Social Work at the College of Staten Island, CUNY. He's Professor Archibald. Dr. Archibald, please forgive me if I say this wrong. He's a PI? On the CSW-E Policy Practice in Field Education Initiative Grant. The purpose of this grant is to develop a community of practice among students, faculty, staff, and community leaders, focused on efforts to identify and eliminate the barriers to an accessible, inclusive, connected, and equitable Staten Island. We also have Dr. Vandana Chaudry, who is an associate professor in the Department of Social Work at the College of Staten Island, CUNY. She integrates disability studies into social work education. Her research looks at disabilities in the global south and questions the disabilities justice at large. We also have Professor Patti Gross, who is an interim director of BSSW program in the Department of Social Work at the College of Staten Island, CUNY. Her research interest is in LGBTQ studies and adoption studies. And we also have Deanesque, who is an MSW candidate at the College of Staten Island, CUNY. Dee is also visually impaired. Please welcome our panelists. Welcome, welcome. Sorry.
We wanted to open it up to the panelists to see if they had any additional comments that they would like to make about any research or.
Well, I'd like to comment on the research that you did. And I think that what you're positing, or what the research is showing, is that even though we here in this department specialize in disability studies, the shame that carried is very great. And so we have to make it more comfortable, not comfortable, but trustworthy and safe to be able to come to professors with certain type of needs, in addition to learning the resources.
I agree. This is Paul. Thank you for sharing that, Patti. This is Paul, Black male, gray hair on top and a gray beard. Got these wonderful glasses on. I have a background that's colorful, hands, spirited. I think the research for me, what stood out for me was two things. One, the literature review first, was that number, that 54.6 students that really came forward and said they needed accommodations, which is, again, it showed the limitations in what Patti was just referring to, the trustworthiness in the space to come forward and then speak about it. So I was concerned about that low number. And then again, that area, the intersystem, that stood out for me because the work that I do with substance use, that double stigma, right? So you have the stigma of a disability, and then you have a stigma of addiction. And so a lot of students, even when we're in class, talk about they didn't even know that substance use recovery was a disability, that they can get accommodations for that. So we don't open that up also. So I just wanted to highlight that because Patti already hit what I wanted to talk about with the work that you did.
Yeah, hello. This is Vandana here, and I'm a brown woman with vision impairment, and I'm wearing a white top and yes, and big hoops. I love earrings. So, but first of all, I want to really, commend the work that that this group has put together, and the research has, I know, because I know the research evolved very organically. So it's of course statistical, and you've highlighted what's going on nationally, but I also know that many of the insights have been informed from an experiential insight that students have been experiencing. And so it's a very rich, that makes it even richer, right? It's not just the empiricism that you bring about in your research, it is focusing on both the self and the systems. And I think what you highlight here speaks to the larger ableism within the field of social work education. And social work, of course, as a profession, what is really central to our profession is social justice and inclusion and belonging. But traditionally, social work has also been has assumed a role of like a helping profession, right? So has been a typical traditional hierarchy of quote unquote the professional helper and the vulnerable clients. And to some extent, the ableism is inherent in that power dynamic, in how it plays out in professional fields. And the social work subject, the social worker, tends to, or has been framed as somebody who would be quote unquote the helper. And thus, the notions of ableism are kind of inherent to that. Somebody who's fit, who's perfect, who's productive, who's capable to help, quote unquote, the vulnerable. So those ideas are so, ableism is kind of like at the heart of who is quote unquote the helper. And I think here in this panel, what you're really trying to show is to disrupt those notions of ableism that are kind of, underlying those ideas of who's a social worker, or who's, the fit social worker or the ideal social worker. And I think one way to disrupt that is to quote unquote crypt this notion of this, social worker. And how do we do that is really by diversifying social work body, like diversifying social workers who are actually working in the field. And one way we do that is by having like the idea of nothing about us without us, to have social workers with disabilities working in the field of disability, right? So, and if we are not able to provide accessible, equitable education to disabled social work students, how are we going to disrupt the ableism that's so steep in social work profession? So I think, this is really important to address, social work education. Is it accessible? And the nature of the fieldwork placement, I know there's a lot of, dynamics involved in that, because it's not just housed within the social work departments, you're involved with the agencies. So there's a lot that needs to be done to sensitize those agencies. And these agencies are also, guided by the mission of social justice. So like making them accountable to access and inclusion. So, in nutshell, I really want to say that if we want to disrupt ableism within social work field, we have to have more social workers with disability. And in order for us to train and educate the next generation of social workers, our schools, our placements have to become accessible. So this is what you highlight is very pertinent, and I hope we can have more discussion and insights from students and from everyone involved. Thank you.
I just want to introduce myself and tell you what I look like. I forgot. So Vandana, thank you very much. And I'm a white woman with silver hair and a black turtleneck. And I'm sitting in a white chair with a poster of New York City behind me.
Hi, my name is Deanesque, and I am visually impaired, and I am also a student. I have lilac silver hair, and I'm 50 years old, cisgender, and I just want to speak a bit about my journey through the education system, being a student with disability. I chose CUNY because of the emphasis on disability studies. I, being disabled myself, and also I have a son who is severely disabled, I thought that I could learn a lot, and I also thought that I would be supported. And while I do think that the college tries to support their students with disabilities, I feel that they fall short of what they could be doing. When I first signed up with the accessibility office, they asked me what I needed, and I didn't know what I needed because I'd not gone through school with a visual impairment before. I graduated with my bachelor's degree before I lost my sight. So there was some confusion over what I needed, what they could help me with. As I started school, I became more aware of the things that I needed. One of the things that I asked the accessibility office for was an assistant who could help me maybe 5 hours a week to help me do research, not write papers with me. I can do that on my own, but to do all the things that are difficult, go to the library, pull books, do research, and these types of things. And I was told that the college could not afford that. So I was on my own. And then when it came to field placement, I will add the caveat that my first field placement happened during COVID. So it was a very trying time for everyone. I was placed somewhere, and then that placement got taken away from me. And my placement instructor, I think, voiced she wasn't intending to voice her frustration to me. I don't believe that she was intending to voice her frustration to me about my visual impairment, but she was basically like, I don't know where I'm going to put you. And by August of that year, I had to find my own field placement because no one would accept me. And it was made known to me that it was because I was visually impaired. So I was really disappointed in the university, in the college, because of the concentration in disability studies. I thought maybe they should be advocating on my behalf to get a field placement that I did not have to create for myself. And I think that even though we tend to look to the invisible disabilities, because it's true that the people with invisible disabilities need as much help as they can possibly get because of the stigma of their that they feel about their disability. You can have a visible disability like I do and still not be able to get your needs accommodated. So if someone like me cannot get my needs accommodated, I don't even know how someone with an invisible disability would go about trying to ask for accommodation. So I think that's where we are right now in how the college is meeting the needs of their students with disability. And I'm only speaking of CSI. I don't know how it is in other colleges, but I would have to assume that it's probably similar.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. That actually kind of brings us into the second question that we were asking. We wanted to know what our panelists felt comfortable sharing regarding accessibility barriers from their own social work education.
I can also add that it was difficult in my internship because I am visually impaired, and it was very difficult to include me. It was very difficult for my placement to include me in meaningful ways that helped me progress and learn. And there are things that can be done to integrate students with visual impairment into both the classroom and the field placement. But I didn't know who to go to get those accessible options. Did I go to the college? Did I go to my field placement? Did I just keep it inside because I felt like I would be ignored anyway? Or did I pony up my own cash to put something in place? I think this is the conundrum that students with disabilities come to. Who do they ask? Who's responsible? Or do they just have to do it for themselves? Or do they just have to swallow the fact that they are disabled and not disclose because they feel like they would never, that no one would believe them or give them accessible options anyway? I think that's the junction that we're at right now. Like, where do we go? Who do we ask? What do we do? Nobody seems to know, and that's a problem.
This is
Yeah.
Paul. Yes, I agree. And just my experience as a social work student, as a social work professor at another university, I've seen this process, and I think Dr. Chaudry said it well in terms of what I saw as a student and early in the profession was that even in the field of social work, because the helping, right? We saw that we are supposed to help people with disability, not that people with disabilities should be social workers. That's what I saw in my early days in social work. So even with the work, our push for self-determination, even with working with clients, our work was helping them, telling them what they need to do, as opposed to hearing. I've seen that transition over time to where now we're putting people first. You know, we say people with disabilities. When I came in, it was just handicapped, right? It was disabled. And so I've seen the transition and the growth of the field itself to really get to this point. So that's why I was excited when I heard about this program myself as a faculty. So thank you for sharing that, Dee.
If I could just also identify myself as a person with invisible disabilities, and having children that have a child that has invisible disabilities. What I want to speak to is the comment that you brought up from CSWE about people with mental health concerns not being welcomed into the field. And I think that we're talking about also a field where to identify, you have to have privilege, you have to have some type of supports, you have to have the money to get testing, you have to know how to advocate for yourself. And I think first of all, as professors in this department, we need to take it upon ourselves, which is hard when it's like when people identify to us. But I think it really has to start with advocacy within our depression in our profession. That was a slip, I think. It's depression.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
like it needs to start at a micro level and progress, right?
Mm. No, and hearing Dee, expressing how, her journey has been and leaving us with that question to ponder about where do we go? I think that's a very sad situation. Students should not be feeling that way. I mean, it's the accessibility has to be provided. I mean, it's just, I mean, I'm a faculty with disability and I know I need access and it's reasonable accommodations. And it's a challenge even at this stage sometimes to get reasonable accommodation. So it's a journey everywhere, but it shouldn't be like that. It doesn't have to be. And that's where I think, we have to really advocate. And even if it is at the cost of, I mean, it is an emotional cost, right? I mean, putting ourselves out there and disclosing and advocating. So, and as Patti said, so eloquently about like disclosure is also comes with the privilege to be able to disclose. We are putting ourselves out there and, some people can disclose more easily and advocate more easily because of the privileges that come or they have, but it doesn't have to be that way. I think we just have to advocate better. And yeah, so I just want to add, validate what everybody's been saying here. And I know one of the participants, Marwa, shared their experience. So thanks so much for sharing that. And I know many of the participants are from our department, which is wonderful to see. And I'm curious to know who here is from, outside CSI, and if they have, or folks from CSI too, like if they have similar experiences or outside CSI with experiences and comments.
I think as we're talking, I'm always thinking about solutions at the same time, because when you talked about Lana, you talked about the micro, but I'm thinking macro. Because I think one of the big areas for me is the professional identity. Right? The professional identity is ableist. It's an ableist identity. That's what I was introduced to. So that's why students don't want to disclose that they have they feel they're not going to get in the program. They feel they're not going to get an internship. So I think it's looking at what is the identity of the profession. And if we're making space like we're supposed to for people with disabilities, we need to say so and we need to show it and do it. So I think I was just thinking, looking at that identity piece and then working through it.
Yeah.
Hi, this is Dee again. If I'm just thinking about what you said. So come there with.
Can't hear you, Dee.
You're breaking up.
What about people who are disabled who get into social work? I mean, I don't see myself as but I do see myself as a social worker, potential social worker, not potentially. I see myself, you know, in the future when I graduate as a social worker who has a disability, but not ableist. So I'm just trying to, in my mind, kind of understand what that means for those of us who are disabled in the social work profession. If social workers view their own profession as being inherently ableist as a helping profession.
That's the big question, right?
Where do we fit in then? We don't really fit in to the concept of being a social worker, right?
I guess people need to get some humility.
That's where we're trying to shift, and Dee just said it well. That's the shift. I'm talking. I can speak from. I'm telling you my journey. That was what I saw. That is what I heard. It was not until I think my third year into teaching that I had my first student who identified fully. He saw differently, and the university where I was did not know what to do. I'm not talking about the department. I'm talking about the university. Didn't know what to do. And so this is what we're talking about. We're talking about shifting identity. So when we start thinking about solutions, and as we're talking about the problems, because social workers, we go after the problems, we advocate, we don't just complain. And so thinking about as students that are out there, we want to hear from you. I mean, what are some of the things that you've been thinking about? Because I'm seeing some things written, trying to read them, but help, we have to do this.
Yeah, we're definitely going to cover them in a little bit, all those amazing comments. But this kind of actually also brings us to the next questions, more for the educators. If you could share any of your experiences working with the student with disabilities, and if you've experienced where their accommodations needs were not met in the classroom or in the field, in the internship, and if there was anything that you were able to do to kind of help or advise, guide, if you could share anything about that.
Well, I'll start by saying that not only do am I an instructor who has identified people who have had people with different challenges have identified themselves to me, but I also have a child that went to the leading college for disability and learning disabilities and ASD in the country. And I can tell you, even in a school such as that, it's still a one-shop deal. It's something has to fit for all instead of the individual. And I think that when you're working with students, it's hard to individualize everything. But if somebody comes to me and self-identifies, hopefully I can set them on the right road. I worked a couple of years ago with a couple of students who had autoimmune diseases and how it affected their ability to perform. And so we were able to work out different types of strategies for them to sometimes not be in school because they couldn't make it to school. So it's a matter of listening, putting on your listening ears, and understanding though that we have to, I think as Paul and everybody said, kind of start working together to identify this in the field as the problem. The problem is that nobody really gives the help that one student might need because the resources aren't even with the people who have the resources.
Yeah, this is Dee. I know that you said this was a question for the professors, but I have I think that, I'm sorry, being visually impaired, my phone's talking to me. I'm sorry, I was listening to my phone. Sorry about that. I think that disability is often considered too big to get your arms around. And even if you're in the accessibility office, you are doing the minimum required to offer whatever student is coming to you in equal access. I'm having a difficulty right now in a class where I have a textbook that is in e-reader form, which gives me equal access, but it's not equitable access because I can't scan the pages visually and pick out the information that I need when I'm taking quizzes. I literally have to listen to the entire book over and over again. I have to start at page 1 and go through the whole thing because there's no way to scan a page for information. It gives me equal access, but not equitable access. Is it technically what I require? Yes, it is. Does it help me? No, it does not. And I think that the accessibility office, they gave me what was required, but not what was helpful. And I think this idea of individualizing education to disability hard to wrap is too hard for schools to wrap their arms around. They have no imagination on how this could possibly take place. They can't imagine how they could offer it. And so they just don't offer it. They give the lowest common denominator of help and that's it. That's all you get. And it's up to the student to take what they're given and try and fold it into an accommodation that actually works for them. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And right now I can tell you in that class, it's not working for me.
Thank you for sharing, Dee.
Right. And a simple solution of that could be that they could scan the book in a digital, like in a Word format. That is so much easier for the screen reader to skip through, the Word file, as opposed to, I think, what they have, the ebook.
Right.
But again, it goes back to the funding, and as you highlight that many times these accessibility offices are also working on this paradigm of compliance. Oh, we are doing what we are supposed to do by law, but it's not really kind of getting to the heart of access, right? Like how can we tailor things so that students have equitable access, as you say. So we do talk about universal design paradigm, and this ebook is a kind of universal design paradigm, like, because now publishers are publishing books and they're also publishing ebooks. And so universal design is a very good perspective to hold on to, because that makes sure that the systems are created such that people with different body minds can access a space, physical space, learning space. However, only universal design is also insufficient, because again, nature of need can also differ across different disabilities. Within the same disability also, there might be some differences how people access certain things. So individual accommodations are necessary. Like a lot of times universities will try to say, let's just focus on universal design and not the individual accommodation, because individual accommodation is expensive. They have to tailor and make things accessible for individual students. So it's not either or paradigm. I think sometimes we try to go in for either universal design or individual accommodations. I think we really have to, do both. We have to build buildings, libraries that are accessible, but we also have to have individual accommodations, even if it means more money, not even if, I mean, that's the thing, we need more funding. And I think we've talked about this in the classes also. Access is, it's not just like, you know, a feel good diversity. Like, you know, a lot of times we're like, feel good. Yeah, we have this diversity, that, I mean, it's access needs infrastructure and infrastructural change, which is, which requires investment, you know. So any kind of inclusion requires investment, you know. So we can't just say like, we can't say we are diverse without really making the financial commitment to, and even the paradigm of diversity we have talked about is so like problematic, right? Who's creating the space? Who's including whom? Like, who sets that agenda? So that, yeah, so that in itself, I mean, that's a larger discussion, but yeah, that's something I wanted to.
So it seems we have a participant with their hand raised. Marvel, would you like to say something? I hope I pronounced that right.
Okay, you're saying it's okay for me to speak?
Yeah, of course.
Yes.
Okay, I am deaf, and I graduated from Columbia in 2012. And all that you're talking about, I you know, I'd hope that we would have made some advancement. But in order for us to advance, we have to get a focus group with people with disability, especially the ones who are out there or going after their BS, MSW. I wanted to do my PhD when I completed my master's in social work. But because it was such a horror, they couldn't find a placement for me. Even when they do find a placement for me, the people didn't want me. They treated me like, you know, I can either be deaf or a social worker. I cannot be deaf and a social worker. So it was so horrible. It was so challenging that I went to NASW and I started the Disabilities Task Force, whereby, because I didn't know how to work with people with disability, because they're treating us like, you know, if they're treating me like that, like I'm a help, like I need service, all social worker is going out there to treat people with disabilities, same way. So I wanted to reverse all of that to show that we can only support them and let the people with disability lead, and we follow, we learn from them. We don't dictate what they should be doing because they have a disability. But you know, while I co-chaired, I've been getting so many emails from people who in university asking me to find work places for them to work for their internship. It has been, you know, and I reach out to a couple of the agencies that I know, and I reach out back to the university because they're supposed to be doing it. So in order for us to move forward, we really need university, the state need to get people with disability who are disabled to let them show what needs to be done. I am deaf, but I'm late deaf, meaning that I can speak. I don't do sign language, I lip read. So my disability is different from somebody who was born deaf. So, you know, there's, as I say, universal access. In order for us to reach there, get all of those people with a disability and try to work towards it. Thank you, Vanda, you're doing a good work. And Dee, thank you, Dee, for talking out.
Thank you so much for telling your story, because I agree with you that universal design is not individual design. And I think that one of the issues that we're having, not only in our colleges and universities, but also in our field placements and in our places when we graduate for people with disability, is that there's no curiosity from our peers. There's no curiosity about our needs and what makes us tick and who we are and how we go about doing things. There's no curiosity from our professors or from the librarians or from peers who could take it upon themselves to help, but their lives are, you know, as chaotic as anybody else's, and they don't have the time to give. And I think that if we really want to advance this, we have to come together as a community and lend a hand to each other and create an outreach that is helpful and individualistic to everyone. Because if you are trying to help a large group of people that you don't see as individuals, you're not helping at all. And if you're not curious about those individuals, then you're not helping at all.
Thank you for sharing all of that. And honestly, I know we don't have much time left. We literally have about 7 minutes. Robert and I just wanted to share some of the recommendations that we found in the literature and something that we've come up, and then we'll open it up to very brief Q&A. So some of the things we found is that educators should assume the presence of students with disabilities in all contexts, regardless of disclosure. That academic policies, resources, and attitudes should promote inclusiveness with a flexible approach to disability. And just like Dr. Chaudry said, universal design should apply to the physical and learning environments on campus and field placements. Robert, you want to share the other three?
Sure. So the last three are: students with disabilities can empower themselves through knowledge about disability policies, reasonable accommodations and resources, and advocate for their and their peers' needs, continuing to have conversations about social work students with disabilities and appropriate accommodations in education and field placements, kind of like what we're doing right now. And social work students with disabilities become social workers with disabilities and can continue advocating for these issues in their employment.
Which
So
is
those are
kind of everything that was just discussed.
So we're going to open it up to everybody. Whoever has like a question or recommendation, please feel free to comment. I know we're running low on time. We only have an hour to do this, but we're making it work.
Yes.
I just
You cut out.
Someone made a comment about how they go through the same thing because they're from another country. And I just want to point that out. Was it Grace who said that? I just want to make a point of dwelling on that for just a second, because I believe that that is 1000% true. And often, because we are largely a English speaking country, we tend to treat people from other countries who don't speak English as if they're dumb and or disabled, which is a shame and needs to change. So I liked that comment, and I agree with you. I think it's a very relevant topic.
I think you were referring to Mercy's comment.
Mercy.
Yeah. Would anybody like to ask a question or say something? If you want to discuss some of the challenges that you came across and any recommendations, or share how you've overcome some of those challenges, please just unmute yourself when you're ready to speak. So Angelique posted in the chat that there is a Google form. It's a networking form. And if you want, you could fill it out. The information will be sent to you, to everybody actually at the end, once we gather all the information, and we'll be able to share that, and you could somehow stay connected. Networking is very important in this field.
This is again, and I just want to make one final point of where we go from here. Speaking of disability, if you're disabled or not disabled, just need to keep pushing, keep advocating, keep going to people who make decisions keep asking for more, just keep pushing the envelope as much as possible, and then be kind to your peers. You know, get curious about who they are and see if they need help. If it wasn't for my personal posse of girls who I go to school with, who support me in all things school related, I wouldn't be able to get through this program. They were curious about me, and now they are supportive of me, and they've become allies. We need each other, and that's the only way that we can move forward at this time. I think just keep pushing the people in charge and get curious about your neighbors, and, you know, offer support when it's needed.
Thank you. Any other closing comments from the rest of the panelists?
Yes, this is Paul again. I would like to see and find out, because, you know, ambassadors, you know, I'm the faculty in support of the ambassadors. I'd like to find out how CSI, Department of Social Work, could partner with the Disability Task Force to do some of this, work. And because we have a disability studies department, so how we could partner with the task force.
I'd like to see within the people within our department come forward to work with the faculty. I think we want to work with you, and we don't have all the answers. That's the big hullabaloo, is that we don't have all the answers. We just have a lot of questions, and we have a lot of things that don't work. So how we can help make things work is going to be where we start advocating within ourselves and then go out to the greater New York community in social work.
We have a question for the panelists from Rebekah. I apologize if I mispronounce it. Please correct me. Rothstein. The question is that Rebekah is curious if people really know what disability means.
Rebekah, I think that's a loaded question, and you should tell us what.
It's been a while since I've been in the field, but I know personally people feel very animate about that word, especially when somebody, you know, defines you as disabled. But I don't know, I get the idea, I guess, that people really struggle and are not sure what that means. At least that was when I was an intern. So, I mean, I was curious if you guys still have found that, like even at stage 1. You know, do they know what it means?
I understand.
You know what I mean? Yeah.
I understand what you're saying, that there's some question over where the demarcation line is in the sand over, is this a disability or is it just an issue for me? I understand, I think, where you're going with that. And I don't know, I think it's personal, but clearly from a college standpoint, you have to be assessed and you have to be given a diagnosis of a disability. Whether or not students want to go through that process and be assessed and be given a diagnosis, or whether they think that that is too stigmatizing for them, it's up to them to make that choice. For me, my disability is clearly a disability. I'm blind. It's a clear demarcation in the sand. If someone has ADHD and it's not really bad, and they don't have a diagnosis, but they kind of know that maybe they have ADHD, are they considered disabled? I don't know. Maybe they are, maybe they're not. They consider themselves disabled, but because they're not diagnosed, they won't be recognized by the college. That's the thing that is very relevant to this discussion, is you need help. You're not going to get help unless you're diagnosed and assessed.
Dee, is following what you're saying. What was I going to say? I believe that this is where the medical model and the social model clash.
I totally agree.
And I think that a lot of it has to do, again, I'll say, with privilege.
Yes,
To be able to get the resources. And I think that
I totally agree.
What we need to do is to, I think, rock the boat. And, for a long time, we've wanted the accessibility office to test, but they won't.
Yes, you have to bring a diagnosis from the outside because there's no testing facility through the accessibility office. Yeah, it's totally an ableism way of looking at things, and it's totally, a medical model. You have to be broken in order for us to accommodate you. That's basically what the college is saying. And,
Yeah.
if you flip that, students have to see themselves as broken to go and ask for help from the accessibility office. And do we really want our students to see themselves as broken before they'll ask for help? I think the accessibility office should be more inviting to people, and the things that are in place, you should be able to go to the accessibility office and just say, I'm having problems with this. What can I do to get help? That should be an option. You shouldn't have to bring an outside doctor's note that says, oh, dear so-and-so, this student has a disability. That should not be a requirement to get help.
Yeah, and just to end with that, so for that question, a lot of times the definition is mainly a legal definition that people pull, and they pull it either from the ADA's definition, American Disabilities Act definition of disability is what most organizations tend to pull that definition from to provide what Dee was talking about, reasonable accommodation. So when we talk about it, but we can definitely work on how do we get people to see it in other ways.
Thank you all for everything tonight. I'm so sad that we have to wrap it up. We're a little over time,
Yes.
but it was such a great discussion, and let's keep these going.
Yes, thank you. Thank you to our panelists for joining us and for speaking, and all our guests that, in the audience. Thank you so much for being here, for supporting us as your peers, as well.
Thank you
as
so
your
much.
colleagues, as Dr. Archibald says. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your very busy Friday night schedules.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank
you for inviting us.
Yeah, thank you for this initiative. That's
Thank
really
you for
good.
having us.
Hopefully this will be one of many, many, many discussions about this, and hopefully we'll be able to see some changes in the near future.
Yeah.
Yep, and feel free to reach out to me or Lana. We want to keep this conversation going in any way possible. So we're,
Thank you so much.
What an incredible conversation, a productive and vibrant conversation. I hate to end this, but we do thank our panelists for their perspectives, for all the beautiful and poignant perspectives and experiences shared by Marva and Dee and Rebekah, holding a lot of space for those perspectives. We encourage everyone to consider this conversation, get engaged with one another and your schools to advocate for yourselves. Let's continue this conversation even after this event. Make sure you're getting involved with the chapter. And we're so happy to have you here. Thanks again, once everyone. Thank you one more time. Have a great evening and enjoy your weekends, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.